In 1994, Rwanda was a land of horror. In just 100 days, over 1 million people, mostly Tutsis, were slaughtered in one of the darkest genocides of modern history. Families torn apart, cities left in ruins, a country scarred so deeply that many believed it would never recover. But fast forward 3 decades, and the story could not be more different. Today, Rwanda is hailed as the Singapore of Africa. Tech giants are setting up their African headquarters in Kigali. Robots assist in surgeries in Rwandan hospitals. And when it comes to doing business, Rwanda now ranks higher than many European countries. It is a transformation so dramatic, so unlikely, that the world is asking, how did this happen? How did a once broken nation, ravaged by war and genocide, transform into one of Africa's most admired success stories? Before we dive into Rwanda's remarkable story, let's draw a parallel. Singapore, a tiny island nation in Southeast Asia, no oil, no diamonds, no vast farmland, surrounded by much larger countries like Indonesia and Malaysia. On paper, Singapore should have struggled, and yet today, it's one of the wealthiest countries in the world. An advanced, high-income economy with the second highest GDP per capita on the planet. A global hub for trade, finance, and technology, built almost from nothing. Now look at Rwanda, a small landlocked nation in the heart of Africa, surrounded by Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Like Singapore, it has no direct access to the sea, and unlike many of its neighbors, Rwanda does not possess significant mineral wealth. Add to this the unimaginable devastation of the 1994 genocide, and most experts, including the World Bank, believed Rwanda's recovery would take generations. But here's the twist. Rwanda defied the odds. In less than 30 years, it transformed from ruins into one of Africa's most admired nations. Kigali, once torn apart by war, is now one of the cleanest and safest capitals in the world. Technology parks attract global investors. Business reforms have made Rwanda one of the easiest places to do business, not just in Africa, but worldwide. The transformation happened faster than anyone predicted. It shocked observers, confounded skeptics, and inspired an entire continent. But the question remains, how did Rwanda pull this off? What policies, leadership choices, and cultural shifts turned a broken country into what some now call the Singapore of Africa? At the center of Rwanda's transformation stands one man, President Paul Kagame. Rising from the ashes of genocide, Kagame made decisions that would forever alter the course of his country. His first priority was not infrastructure, not technology, not even the economy. It was people. Because at the heart of Rwanda's genocide was the toxic division between Hutu and Tutsi. Healing that wound was the only way forward. The new government's first mission was national reconciliation. Kagame and his leadership launched an ambitious, nationwide program to mend a society ripped apart by hate. One of the boldest initiatives was the Gakaka courts, a community-based justice system where survivors confronted perpetrators face to face. For many, it was painful. For some, it was imperfect. But it gave voice to millions. In just over a decade, these grassroots courts processed nearly 2 million cases, a staggering achievement that helped Rwanda move forward without being paralyzed by endless trials. Beyond justice, Kagame dismantled the very symbols of division. Ethnic labels were banned. Divisive classifications were removed from ID cards. The government pushed a single identity. Rwandan, not Hutu, not Tutsi, not TWA, just one people. This cultural reset was not cosmetic. It was the bedrock for progress. Because as Kagame understood, a nation divided can never build. Once reconciliation was underway, the next critical step was security. The genocide had left the state hollow, its institutions broken, its security forces scattered. Without stability, no progress was possible. Kagame poured resources into rebuilding the army, strengthening intelligence networks, and enforcing strict security policies. For some, this was controversial, an iron-fisted style of governance. But for a country traumatized by war, stability was non-negotiable. Rwanda needed peace, order, and protection from insurgents that still lurked beyond its borders. This twin strategy, unity at home, security on the ground, laid the foundation for everything that came next. Only once Rwanda had healed and stabilized could it begin its journey toward prosperity. After the genocide, Rwanda knew that survival depended first on security. The government rebuilt the police and military from scratch, curbed violence in the streets, and sealed its borders against rebel incursions. Refugees who had fled to neighboring countries began to return, and insurgent groups that once terrorized villages steadily lost their influence. At the same time, Kagame consolidated power under a strong central government. To some, it looked like iron control, but for Rwanda, it meant stability. And that stability created the space for something the country desperately needed: development and investment. And then came the real test: economic growth and infrastructure. This is where Paul Kagame and his team took a path unlike any other in Africa. For decades after independence, African nations looked to the West for guidance. They copied Western models, borrowed heavily from institutions like the IMF and World Bank, and tried to replicate policies designed for Europe and America. But time and again, that model failed. Why? Because Africa's conditions, its demographics, its resources, its challenges were never the same as the West. Despite everything, most African countries continue to walk the Western path. Why? Because their leaders believe survival depends on Western approval. And perhaps they're not entirely wrong. History shows that countries daring to reject Western alliances have often paid a steep price. They've been isolated, vilified in international media, and their leaders branded as dictators. Some have even been assassinated for refusing to bend. But Paul Kagame broke that cycle. Unlike many of his peers, he refused to fit neatly into the Western mold. Instead, he crafted a model that was uniquely African, one that balanced diplomacy without dependency. Rather than clinging solely to Western partners, Kagame built relationships with both the West and non-Western powers. From Europe to Asia, he cultivated bilateral ties, ensuring Rwanda was never boxed in, never entirely beholden to one camp. Yet diplomacy was only part of the story. The real foundation of Rwanda's miracle lay in something simpler and harder: work. Kagame's government poured resources into the basics: roads, electricity, schools, and hospitals. He turned Rwanda's so-called disadvantages into opportunities. Landlocked, then build world-class logistics hubs and make Rwanda a transit economy. Few natural resources, then invest in people, technology, and services. By the early 2000s, those choices began to pay off. Year after year, Rwanda's economy grew steadily, defying the grim predictions of the 1990s. Kigali, once scarred by war, began to transform. Its streets became organized, clean, and safe. Public transport was reformed. Electricity expanded to rural areas. And in a bold move, Rwanda invested heavily in ICT, making high-speed internet widely accessible. Today, Kigali is one of Africa's cleanest, safest, and most connected capitals. The results are visible everywhere. Modern hospitals where surgeries can be assisted by robots. Universities that train Africa's next generation of leaders. Tech hubs that attract multinational corporations. Rwanda didn't just rebuild, it reinvented itself. Kagame's vision went beyond rebuilding roads and hospitals. He understood that Rwanda needed a global identity, something that could rebrand a country once synonymous with genocide into a nation known for opportunity. And so, the government invested heavily in tourism. Today, tourism contributes more than 11% of Rwanda's GDP. The Visit Rwanda campaign is everywhere, so much so that the slogan is emblazoned on the jerseys of Arsenal Football Club in London. High-end ecotourism has become Rwanda's calling card. Thousands of visitors pay premium prices, sometimes thousands of dollars a day, for the chance to trek through misty forests and come face-to-face with the country's famous mountain gorillas. At the same time, Rwanda boosted exports of coffee and tea, crops that not only earn foreign exchange but also create jobs across rural communities. These efforts were guided by Rwanda's ambitious Vision 2020 strategy, a national roadmap for development. The results speak for themselves. Poverty rates have been cut significantly. Access to healthcare, education, and infrastructure has expanded. Business reforms have made Rwanda one of the easiest places in the world to register and operate a company. In fact, in Kigali, you can process a government service faster than it takes to renew a driver's license in New York. But Rwanda's miracle wasn't just about economics. It was also about inclusion. The government rewrote laws and policies to put women at the heart of national rebuilding. By 2008, Rwanda became the first country in the world where women held a parliamentary majority. Today, women are not just in parliament, they lead ministries, police forces, corporations, and local councils. In rural areas, land reform gave women legal ownership and access to credit, unleashing a wave of grassroots development. This empowerment reshaped entire communities. It gave women voices in decision-making, improved household incomes, and accelerated Rwanda's recovery. In a continent where women are often marginalized, Rwanda turned gender equality into a national engine of growth. If there is one sector where Rwanda has truly distinguished itself, it is education and innovation. No other country on the continent has embraced technology with the same level of commitment. After the genocide, Rwanda made education a national priority. New schools were built. Enrollment rates soared. Girls gained unprecedented access to learning. And in a bold move, the government adopted English as the primary language of instruction, strategically positioning Rwanda to better connect with global markets and international investors. But the real story is Rwanda's leap into innovation. Kigali has become a magnet for tech startups, drawn by a government that actively encourages experimentation. Just an hour south of the capital, for example, a company called Zipline is transforming healthcare delivery. Its fleet of drones transports blood and vital medical supplies to remote health facilities, reaching clinics that would otherwise wait hours, sometimes days, for life-saving shipments. The impact has been staggering. One study showed that drone blood deliveries reduced maternal deaths from postpartum hemorrhage by more than half. Behind the technology are stories of resilience, like Abdul Salam Nizeyimana, a genocide survivor who became Zipline's first Rwandan employee. For him, Rwanda's innovation drive is not abstract policy, it's personal. He says the government prioritizes new ideas and is willing to take bets on technologies others might dismiss as too risky. From smart city initiatives to cashless payments, from e-governance systems to robotics in hospitals, Kigali is rebranding itself as Africa's hub for the future. A country once defined by tragedy is now redefining itself through technology and showing the world that innovation can flourish even in the most unlikely of places. The drone program is just one piece of Rwanda's larger story, a relentless pursuit of development and advancement. Kigali has reinvented itself as a hub for global conversations on technology, sustainability, and inclusive growth. International summits on innovation and development are now held in Rwanda, bringing world leaders, CEOs, and changemakers to a country once written off as irreparably broken. But the transformation isn't limited to technology. Post-genocide Rwanda had to rebuild its health system literally from scratch. Clinics were expanded, doctors and nurses retrained, and a national health insurance scheme was rolled out. The results have been dramatic. Child mortality dropped, malaria deaths declined, HIV infections fell. Rwanda became a model for vaccination programs and maternal care. In a country where healthcare was once a distant dream, it became a basic right. At the community level, Rwanda revived an old tradition, ubudehe. Once a cultural practice, it was reimagined to classify households by income and ensure the poorest received targeted government support. It was a simple but powerful idea, using local knowledge to fight inequality and expand access to public services. And then there's Rwanda's commitment to the environment. In 2008, the country shocked the world by banning plastic bags, years before most developed nations took similar steps. Every last Saturday of the month, communities come together for Umuganda, a nationwide cleanup campaign that combines civic duty with collective pride. Streets are swept, ditches cleared, and public spaces renewed. These monthly rituals have given Rwanda the reputation of having the cleanest streets in Africa. But the vision goes further. Reforestation programs, wildlife conservation, and sustainable agriculture projects now anchor Rwanda's long-term planning. Protecting gorillas in the Virunga Mountains is not just about tourism revenue, it's about ecological responsibility. Expanding forests is not just about climate, it's about building resilience for generations to come. This is the essence of Rwanda's story. From genocide to rebirth, from ruins to resilience, a nation once shattered has rebuilt itself brick by brick through reconciliation, innovation, healthcare, education, gender equality, and environmental stewardship. Perhaps the most remarkable part of Rwanda's story is this. It achieved all of this without relying on the so-called structural adjustment programs, those economic blueprints once pushed by the IMF and World Bank in the 1970s and 80s as Africa's supposed salvation. Kigali refused to copy and paste foreign formulas. Instead, it wrote its own rules, designed its own models, and chose policies rooted in its own reality. And that decision, to go independent, is exactly why it succeeded. But this raises a profound question. If Rwanda can achieve such a transformation in just 3 decades, after surviving one of the darkest chapters of human history, why can't other African countries do the same? The answer is not a mystery, it is governance. Africa's greatest challenge has never truly been the West. It has not been a lack of money or resources or even human talent. Africa has all of those in abundance. What the continent lacks is good governance. Since independence, far too many African nations have been led by rulers who were weak, corrupt, or compromised. Leaders who placed their own survival above the survival of their nations. Leaders who bowed to Western influence rather than standing tall for their people. Leaders who lacked the vision, ambition, and patriotism required to lift their countries from dependency into sovereignty. And this is where Paul Kagame stands apart. Whatever one thinks of his style of leadership, there is no doubt about this. He is a patriot. He is a leader who placed the nation above himself. He was unafraid to chart a new course, to take risks, and to do what was necessary, even when it meant going against the grain of Western advice. That is why Rwanda succeeded where so many others have failed. Rwanda's story is not just about rebuilding a country. It is about proving what is possible when leadership is guided by discipline, vision, and a fierce commitment to national sovereignty. Of course, Kagame's success has not come without controversy. And not surprisingly, most of that criticism has come from the West. For years, international media outlets and political think tanks have painted Kagame not as a visionary leader, but as an authoritarian dictator. They argue that Rwanda's dazzling economic progress masks a darker reality, one where civil and political rights are suppressed. Louis Mudge, Central Africa Director for Human Rights Watch, put it this way: Rwanda has made some really striking and remarkable progress in terms of economic gains, in terms of access to health, in terms of education promotion. Unfortunately, those changes have not been matched in terms of affording people basic rights, civil and political rights. Rights to express themselves freely, whether that be in the press or at the ballot box. Rights to challenge the government. For Mudge and others, democracy in Rwanda is little more than a performance. Elections, they argue, are reduced to a formality, a box ticked for Paul Kagame rather than a genuine contest of ideas. But here's what these critics often forget. For most Africans, the real concern is not the form of government, whether it's democracy, a monarchy, military rule, or even authoritarianism. What matters most is results. What matters is whether a child can go to school, whether hospitals function, whether innovation is encouraged, and whether there is stability. And in Rwanda, results are hard to ignore. Education is free for children from nursery through 9 years of basic schooling. Technology and innovation are not only encouraged, they are actively prioritized. Public services are efficient, and corruption is among the lowest in Africa. Which other so-called democratic African countries can say the same? This is the paradox of Rwanda, a nation celebrated for its progress, yet condemned for its politics. But for millions of Rwandans, the question is not whether Paul Kagame fits the Western definition of a democrat. The question is simpler: has their country worked under his leadership? What truly matters for most Africans is simple: an enabling environment, a system where businesses and organizations can thrive. In Rwanda, you can register a company in just 6 hours. Think about that. For most Africans, what matters most is not slogans about democracy or lectures about human rights. What matters is whether their leaders deliver roads, electricity, schools, hospitals, and security. Because once those basic systems exist, Africans, hardworking and resilient, can succeed on their own. And that's why, if you ask the average African whether they would choose a leader like Paul Kagame, the answer would be clear. Again and again, people would choose him, not because of political labels, but because of results. The West, ironically, loves to accuse others of human rights abuses, while conveniently forgetting its own long list of atrocities against Africa, atrocities for which it has never been punished. The truth is, Western critiques often ring hollow because they come from the same powers that built their dominance on colonization, exploitation, and bloodshed.
Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth coverage.